So,
Shift.
what's that?
Shift.
Yeah,
Shift.
holy shift.
Holy shift.
So we have a look at creating urgency and overcoming buyer reluctance, and my pages will turn. Keeps wanting to go back to the previous chapter, and I don't want to do that. Stand out from the competition, seller staging strategies. All right, any takeaways? First, let's go. I want to look real quick and the end of the last chapter, the 7 maxims for pricing in a shifted market. Keep your presentation as current as possible and let your ongoing research do the talk.
Yeah, sorry.
How is that faring in what we're seeing right now with the market, do you think? Are the presentations needing to be, how much retroactively are we needing to go back in and freshen things up? Is it shifting that drastically, or are we seeing shifts in other parts of the market that we're not seeing in others? Allie, any insight? Like, have you seen any need to freshen up your presentation? If you do, how many listing presentations have you done in the last 30 days?
First of all, I have not done formal listing presentations. All the listings I've had were like my super immediate seer,
Okay.
no like and trust. They were like, we know we're listing with you, period, number one. Like, don't even have questions. That being said, one, I can speak to multi-units, in my opinion and experience, have experienced a shift here quicker than residential. They're moving slower. They're staying on market longer. Residential is kind of, I'm seeing a lot more price decreases in residential. And you had said something last week about in your MLS expireds. Our expireds are way higher than yours are. But it just, for us in certain areas, it's still like first day on market, multiple offers, 20 grand over, we're not getting the house. But for, what was I saying, multi-units, I've seen that shift a lot faster. And talking with other agents, a lot of people are just starting to feel the shift. You know, we only had 2 offers, you know, we're used to 7, or we ended up getting our offer accepted. With the house I did just list 2 months ago, the price that I recommended would have flown. And now when we came back and I was like, I just don't recommend that price anymore. I recommend going 10 grand under. And they said, well, yeah, but you said, and I was like, oh, I know what I said. That was 2 months ago. Y'all took your time. That we're seeing the beginning signs of a shift and what that's happening. And like I said last week, I didn't fight them as hard as I wish I would have. And I priced above where they wanted me to. And here we are. All the feedback is it's just priced too high for the condition. And so now we have to reduce and have that, you know, blemish on us.
And so, I mean, do you think, with that being said, do you think that obviously everybody's putting up examples or have put up examples of the market shifting in areas where, you know, it's shifting already and we're not seeing it in certain areas, but we're seeing it there or here. Do you think it's getting more, it is getting more, you know, it's happening more often because prices are going too high? Have we reached that point where they're too high?
I think we're in a weird, just my personal opinion, we're in a weird kind of like, we're seeing signs of the shift, but also we're in that spring summer market. So we are seeing that hotness, more things come on. And so feel like that's kind of counteracting a little bit of
Right.
the shift. I think we would be feeling it more if we were in a different time of year.
So do you think we're getting a false sense of security?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this hot spring and summer market is the shift is hiding behind that.
Yep.
And come late summer, fall, people are going to get smacked in the face and be like, what the heck happened? If they haven't been paying attention. And in my experience, there are certain homes that my listing, for example, was priced for the 2 months ago market, and we're not there.
So are we seeing more buyer reluctance?
I would say yes.
I would too. I was just
Whereas several months ago, right, it was like, we have to put an offer in because we're not going to get another opportunity. Now it's like, no, I'm not buying this because X, Y, and Z. And sellers are still like, no, we're still in a seller's market. Forget you. Or, you know, interest rates are rising and the price has changed. Or they have heard from somewhere without follow-up and education that we are experiencing the beginning signs of a shift. And they're like, it's going to crash. I'm going to wait.
So that false sense of security we were just talking about is stemming from, you know, listings, and we got a listing and it's great, but we're seeing an increase. I was talking to a closing agent the other day, and she mentioned, you know, is it me or did business drop off? And I said, no, we're busy. The problem is we're seeing more terminations now. So the busier we get, are we getting busy good or are we getting busy bad? And how do we prevent busy bad from being a reoccurrence?
I was talking to Maddie the other day, and she was like, I have had this year, like in different times, more terminations than I've had in the past 2 years. You know, same.
Yeah, I'm terminating 2 today.
That's busy bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's $250,000 gone. And why? I blame this one on the fact that we had a seller that wanted to take advantage of the hot market. We had an offer in 6 hours. They found a house to upgrade into. We had the offer on that in 2 days. We had it pending in 2 days, contingent. And now they want to back out. Now, why? It happened that quick. And even though as an agent, you go in and you set the expectations, first of all, I told them flat out 3 months ago, I didn't want them doing it at all. It's too soon. They've only owned the house for 18 months. There's no reason for them to leave it. Now, based on the seller's market, they could have had a few bucks in their pocket if they moved into the right house. But they didn't pick the right house to move it to buy. The equity was off by 20 grand. And it was explained to them over and over again before they signed the offer to purchase the house they were going to purchase. This isn't the right move. I mean, this is my advice as your professional agent. You can do it if you want to do it, but understand what it's going to do to your equity and your balance. It's a sideways move. You're not gaining anything other than a mortgage bill that's higher. It's not the right move. So they did it anyway. And then after a week of sitting on it, and they started to see inspections coming through, and then they started to see appraisals getting ordered, and they panicked. And they backed out. How do we prevent that? You set all the expectations in the world that you can, but you're never going to stop a client from doing what a client wants to do. And when a client wants to sell their house because the market's so hot, but sees that on the buyer's end, it's not so hot, they back out. Buyer reluctance. And I think we're getting more of that, and we're going to see more of that. And I think you're right. If we were in a different time of year, we would be seeing it would be more glaring than it is. I think we have padded numbers coming in, and we have to better prepare for what it talks about in Tactic 9, overcoming buyer reluctance. And in looking at Tactic 9, are there any ahas from that reflect where we are in the current market? Anybody? Any particular examples from Tactic 9 that?
Chapter 8.
Chapter 9 for buyer's reluctance.
Buyer's reluctance.
Yeah, we were 8 and 9. No,
That jumped 8 because of what we were just talking about, kind of ties in. Because I think we're seeing more of that and less of a, well, we got to stage this house right to make the price justifiable. I mean, we have to do that too. But I think we're seeing more buyer reluctance than we are challenges in getting listings sold right now. That doesn't mean we won't going forward. But the expireds are up there. They're not quite up here yet. They will be. And those expireds are happening because listing agents are putting houses on the market. And they're not putting them on, there's overpriced, they're not staged correctly. We can address that, but for basis of the conversation we were just having regarding buyer reluctance and deals getting terminated, what about the buyer reluctance Tactic 9 can we apply or into this conversation?
To me, being the local economist, know your markets. Be the source of the source. Understanding what's going on now, not 6 months ago.
Right.
6 months ago was 6 months ago. And since Allie's off the call, I can say they don't know what they don't know. I know she doesn't like that expression, but we're back to what you just said. They don't know what they don't know. They think they know.
Right.
Because they're reading the newspaper, and the newspaper says it's hot. And the newspaper says, great. Man bites dog is not a news story.
Yeah, I agree. What about number 2 in that page 178, 3 ways to energize your urgency? And Mike just touched on one of them, Allie, becoming the local economist of choice. The news is on a 15-second cycle, not a 15-day cycle. So what happened 15 days ago is not true today. Number 2, I like a lot. And I don't think it gets enough attention because as agents, we have a tendency to get wrapped up in the quantity and not the quality. And then we get wrapped up in when the quantity is not there, we get wrapped up in the sense of urgency we have to try to get a deal to the table. And we push and we skip steps and we shortcut our way into it because we're anxious to get one to the table. And then we have an agent back out. We didn't establish what's their big why, what's their big reason. How do we tap into that on somebody who panic buys or refuses to buy because the market isn't where it should be? What's one way we can tap into a client's big why? Help them tap into it.
Maybe figure out and identify specifically why they would want to move. I know towards the beginning of the chapter, it talks about, people normally want to buy because of family, work, maybe wanting to be in a better school district if they have children, maybe a neighborhood that's more family friendly or something like that. So I guess more or less betterment of quality of life. And so encouraging them to be like, well, like, listen, I understand that it's scary right now and maybe it's a little uncertain and you have some hesitancies, but that doesn't mean that like your reasons, not to buy somehow outweigh the reasons to buy. And, just like maybe like reminding them, be like, like there's a property that's in your favorite school district, like things are uncertain, but that doesn't mean that, you know, this isn't still an opportunity. And to kind of encourage them to move forward with it, you know, if it is actually like a good fit for them, and kind of work past that fear.
So how do we do that before we sign a contract?
So that's like what Alana was alluding to. Sorry, I have trades in my house and they ordered lunch and I didn't know. But anyways, the 7 connecting questions, right? The who, what, why, where, and how. Like, what is important, you know, about this move? Who is it going to affect? Those, like, asking those questions in your buyer consultation, if that's what you're doing. Or, you know, I usually get to my first showing and really have some great dialogue with my clients then and find out those things. What is important? What is significant? And there's that thing, Joe says it all the time, and I'm not going to get it right, but like, emotion makes you think and something makes you act, whatever. And so like keeping the emotion out of it as much as we can in a highly emotional situation, and just bringing back the facts. You said that you needed to be in this home by this date.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're doing a 30-45 day close, that means, you know, this is when we need to be looking. This is when our latest time, or, you know, whatever the facts are of the significance behind their move. Just bringing that, you know, it's not my opinion as to why you should buy this house. It's not my opinion as to what area is better than the next. It's what you told me you wanted, and here it is. Here I'm presenting it to you. And if you don't move on it, what does that look like moving forward? Because you now have not you have not satisfied your motivation behind your move. And so then what does that look like? What is that pain point?
Right.
I taught a wine 101 class. Towards the end, I would ask my students, what is the purpose of the purchase? I don't know. Why are you buying? What's the purpose?
Yes.
You have a goal. You're right. I mean, I'm reading on 173, only buyers who are able, ready, and willing. You know, he makes the whole point. There's paragraphs on willing. I have a buyer right now that sold her house in Lawrenceville. Was supposed to be out in June, got an extension to September, and I'm scared because I'm afraid this lady's gonna go, oh, September, I have lots of time to think about how. No, lady, you don't. No, you know, because September's gonna be here, and I don't know if she can get another extension. I'm not worried about it, that's her problem. You know, I'm not stopping to show her property. My point is, we need to get her past the, maybe, I don't know. There's a thought, run.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with the shift, what we're going to see a lot of too is the ready and the willing, but not the able. As interest rates go up and before sellers' prices come down, the able is going to it's going to mess with people.
Yeah, and I mean that the able is starting to seep in now. The ables, that's a different problem, and that's what, remember, it always goes back to, you know, what we can control, and what we can control is dealing with buyers that are either ready or reluctant, and we have to establish that reluctance early and often, because even if there's a slight hesitation and you go forward, how much time are you investing in that one when there are 4 or 5 more that you need to, that are more willing, and you're missing?
But it said some, go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It said something in there, which it made me think of when you were saying that, was like our ones that are teetering and they're a little bit reluctant a couple months ago or last year, I could put them on the side and come back 6 months later and be like, hey, y'all ready now? And it would be ready. But, you know, in the book, it said something like, we can't do that. We can't forget about them. We have to check in with them very, very often, or we'll completely lose them.
We have to continue cultivating. If that's where they go, we get excited when we take somebody out of cultivate and into active, because that means we're on our way to earning our pay and making it, you know, making it profitable. But is it profitable to continue an active client that has a sense of reluctance? And if it's not. The answer is no. So you have to take that client that you're cultivating and really make sure, even if there's a slight hesitation, and go back to what Ali said earlier, readdress your 7 questions, reestablish the motivation, make sure that their personal motivations match who it's going to affect, the who, what, when, where, why. And obviously we just said the how is going to be an issue because it's just interest rates are going up, but the who, what, when, where, why, we have a sense of being able to at least establish it, maybe not control it. We can't control our clients all the time, but our professionalism tells us that we need to be more extremely thorough about making sure that their reluctance is not going to peek its head out, you know, 10 days into the transaction period. You know, so we have to make sure that we're doing our due diligence for our clients. At the same time, we're also making sure that we're investing the efforts that we're investing in properly, you know. And I say that, and I have a client that covered all the bases, did all of the reluctance piece you can possibly do with this young couple. We got 10 days in and they got cold feet. I mean, it happens. But we can't, just because we can't submit to, well, those things happen, so I'm going to skip this step. We have to remember to revert back to establishing these key points of making sure that reluctance does not peer its head, and we aren't investing energy and time into a lost cause. So I think page 188 sums it up in dealing with the 4 strategies of dealing with buyer reluctance. Why wait? Trade up. Less is more by narrowing the field. Find a best buy. Get while the getting's good. I think we're there with that false sense of security we touched on earlier. We're getting a little bit of it. The good is there, and we're seeing some getting. But we need to keep making sure that we're cultivating the right clients, that their reluctance is not an issue, and that we're motivating, we're readdressing their motivations and making sure that they're going to go forward and move forward with it. Because we don't want to see a steep drop off. The market is going to shift. We know it. It is shifting, but it's going to make that turn. And if the buying season was different, we'd be in that. We'd see it now. But we have to be careful we don't fall out of practice of making sure that our clients are in both feet, moving forward. Let's go. Let's not get too excited too quickly, too antsy, and forget and skip steps and not make sure we're not wasting our time on something that's going to fall apart.
Well, I think too, and obviously, so there are some times when, you know, like you said, like you covered all of the bases and some people are just going to do what they're going to do. But I think too, there's going to be an interesting, I know for me, it is always, you know, I do things the way I do them until there's like something happens and it stops me in my tracks. And I'm like, ooh, okay, let's put a system in place to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Right.
And so I think, you know, with some, as we're going into this shift and we do see more, you know, buyers getting cold feet or whatever, there are going to be those people that are like, yeah, no, you know, everything's fine. That false sense of security until you're on that end and your buyer has cold feet and you have to call that listing agent and say, hey, we changed our mind. And hear an earful from that listing agent about what you put the seller through, and have to have the conversation with your buyer that's like, okay, this is your right, but that means you lose your hand money. And that was just a $2,000 lesson to be learned. And having those hard conversations is going to then, I think, motivate, and you'll be, you know, a step behind the game, but, you know, pain creates motivation.
Right.
So, you know, That's gonna be interesting to see, because those suck. Those conversations are awful to have. They're not fun.
No, I've had two in the last 24 hours. They're not fun.
Yeah, they are not fun.
They're not fun. Any big takeaways from 8 or 9? Any other standout points, ahas, things we want to talk about, throw out there for 8 or 9?
Just one system that I really liked from it was in regards to staging, was the, compiling a list of just dirty, cluttered homes and then comparing those to homes that were staged and asking the sellers, like, which ones do y'all like?
Yep.
And then having them point it out and be like, okay, so you're telling me you're going to listen, you're going to get your home cleaned or staged or whatever. That was just, I think, a good system that I was like, the simplicity behind that, but I love it.
Yeah, I mean, what would it take to go through the market with them? Look at the houses that are in your CMA. Look at the houses that are in your CMA. If you pull comps from houses that sold the last whatever time frame you have punched into your CMA, and you pull them and you look, and if you take 5 minutes and look at the pictures, there's this house, there's this house. Which one do you want to be? Where do you want to be? Because what your expectations are and what the reality can be, this is what it's going to take.
Yeah, I think from a seller standpoint, we're not going to see, and we aren't seeing as often, buyers are just going to take anything that comes on market because they don't have a choice. We're going to be able to be a little picky.
We're not
And
there
it's
anymore.
just like, and it's like, which home, like think about a commercial. You have 15 seconds to sell your ad. That's all you get.
All the years that I was in radio, when I first started out, my mentor told me we would do my air check tapes. We'd listen to them, and it was the same routine every week. And he would say, you have 5 seconds to convince me. You have 5 seconds to convince me. What you're going to say has to matter to me. You have 5 seconds to do it. Make it count. 5 seconds is not a lot of time. And the common thread, I think, and we can put a bow on this, but I think the common thread in these two and what we talked about today, and I quite frankly don't think we talk about it enough. And we're really gonna harp on it during PC starting next week. Setting expectations. And not just setting expectations, but setting the right ones. And not just for your client, for yourself.
But you have the buyer side, the seller side too.
Yeah.
Because again, my question is there an interest or a need for some type of either a CMA or an appraisal class for a shifting market? Because if you want to use the comps in the past 3 months when you had buyers, if everything happens like we're talking about, what are the new comps going to be? And I mean, you're going to have to justify it to a seller, say, hey, I know you could have gotten X, Y, Z. I know what your neighbor sold for 6 months ago. I got good news and bad news for you. It's all the same. It was 6 months ago.
Right.
So,
But another statistic to not forget in that scenario is when you look at those, some of those don't negate looking at the days on market.
right.
Houses 6 months ago might have sold for more than what they should have, or more than what they would today. But how long was it on the market? And because the listing agent was patient and didn't adjust the price or didn't move things aggressively like we have to now, and we have to be more aware of or conscientious of now, what was the days on market for that house? Is it comparable to what you're seeing today? No. The answer is no, it's not. If you price too high, your days on market are going to climb. They're going to climb. Now, if you're seeing a flurry of activity, but you're not seeing any action being taken, I have a good example. I have the house that I have pending right now. It's 220. We listed it at 219.9. It's selling for 215. We had a ton of activity. We had 7 offers on it in the first 6 days. Not one of them was over a $200,000 net for the client. Not one. Not one. That was, to me, very indicative of where we're heading. Extremely indicative of where we're heading. Buyers are starting to get more aware because the interest rates are telling them to be. So when we do those CMAs, let's make sure we're setting the proper expectation of Mike just touched on. Look at 6 months ago, is that where we're at today? How many days on market was that one compared to if it sold, if you listed it, that same house at the same price today, how many days on market would it sit today? It'd be much higher. And the buyers are telling us that. The interest rates are telling them.
Well, that goes back to what we talked about last week, was pulling the stats from the MLS and clicking on tabular and finding how many days on market, what percentage sold for over list, at list, below list, and by how much. And that goes into pricing ahead of the market. And, you know, if typically I would want to price here because I want to price ahead of the market, I'm going to lower it by whatever percentage in that tabular sold for below list price. So number one, I loved that. And I've really been using that, you know, for both my buyers and my sellers. You know, when we're looking at a home and I'm with my buyers, like, what, okay, I know what the listing agent priced it at, but that doesn't always mean crap, because I've had 2 significantly low appraisals come back. I'm talking significantly under. And I'm like, and I've done everything I could. I advised all the people I could, but in the end, the seller and the seller's agent was like, oh, it's going to appraise. And sure enough, it did not. So having that research and that information when you're presenting an offer and presenting, you know, I've called on a listing agent and said, here are the comps I'm pulling. Where are you coming up with your information? This is why we offered what we did. But on the listing side, and I did this for 2 listings that I just had multi-units, I did a search and saw who was buying in those areas, what agents were buying in those areas, and I called them up. Do you have any buyers? You know, what are your buyers looking for? I see that you've bought a lot in this area, or other listing agents in that area. Can you tell me what your experience was like? How much activity did you get? How long did you wait before you had to reduce? What was that behind it? Having conversations with other professionals in the field about what their experience looked like, because they came before us and did it, you know, that brings just so much value to your client, and it costs you a phone call.
Yep. You know, I think we're going to get into a period here where we will see listing presentations, if you have the opportunity to do any, and you don't get it because you were cautiously optimistic with the buyer's expectations regarding price, and they went with another agent, and all of a sudden, you fast forward 6 months later or longer, and the house reappears on the market, and they call you because you continue to maintain your professionalism by selling houses and listing houses, and you're working the shift, and you're doing well. Now all of a sudden that client comes back to you. They come back to you because you were honest with them. They were appreciative of your honesty and the way that you spoke with them. I think we'll see wins in that area a lot more predominantly a year from now than would be a concern today. And I think we need to make sure that we're creating the right sense of urgency on the buyer side, but balancing expectations correctly on the seller side. And, you know, to me, that's what I think 8, 9 is odd as a combination, it seems like, but it addresses the duality that we face as agents, right? I mean, we have a responsibility to do the best we can for our agents or our clients. But when you look at, like my situation specifically, I had a buyer and seller, same person, and it was protect them on the buying side from not overpaying for a house in this current market, but get maximum dollar for the house they're selling. That's, you know, significantly higher than what it probably would go for in a different market and different buying season. It's that duality, and we have to make sure that we're setting the right expectations on both sides. Okay.
There's some good, I know we're over time. There's some really good graphics in James Shaw's Pivot Shift or whatever the Facebook group is. There's some really good graphics going around there about pricing ahead of the market and
Yep.
people are sharing listing presentations and awesome things. So if you guys are not in that group, get in it. And if you
Get in it.
are, just
Yep.
go through it and look at some of those graphics that are going
Very,
around.
very, very, very good group. A lot of resources there. I mean, it's almost like having a mini KW Connect. It's really, really crazy. There's a lot of good stuff there. So yes, excellent. All right, guys. That'll do it for today. I think we're jumping on tonight, but I'm not 100% certain on that. I think Joe was going to try to jump in, but we are, we'll one of us will chime in tonight and jump in and host, and we'll be there if anybody wants to jump in for a second round. If not, I will see some of you possibly tomorrow.
All right.
I
All right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Thanks.